Let me start with a quick question. Why would leadership matter? Why would compassionate leadership matter? I've always said to myself, I want to be like that person. It's like I want to be like Mike, and I grew up in my driveway playing hoops, and I always said I want to be a great basketball player. But here's the honest answer. I was never great enough to be a great basketball player. It was a hobby. But as I grew up, I started to say to myself, I know I want to lead people. And the word leadership didn't mean a lot at the time. But when I think back at it, I met all these leaders. Some of them were super political, and you know those leaders. They're like boxing you out in a meeting so that they look good and you look bad. There's the people that rule with an iron fist, someone that you're scared of. I was never that person. And you start to sort of question as you grow up, what's the kind of leader I want to be? Weird, because when you're a kid, you're not sitting there and saying, I want to be X leader. But to be very honest, every single person says, I want to be more like this person. I want to be more like my dad, or I want to be more like this person to be a profession. And you do. When you start your first job, you start to say, I want to be a CEO like that leader because they own that room, or they make decisions so brilliantly, they present flawlessly. But then you often see this whole idea of a bunch of people that don't behave the way you want to behave. And you see them, you're scared of them. They sort of give you this perspective that, you know, they're going to make every decision and you're just going to go along with it. And that's a bit of how the compassionate leadership, or that compassionate edge in leadership, was born. I said to myself over and over again, I don't want to be, so easy that I get taken advantage of, but I want to be kind. I want to be caring. And it all started, funny enough, in my home away from home. I had the fortunate privilege of growing up at a place called Camp Timberlane. So you're in beautiful Haliburton, Ontario. You close your eyes, you picture it, you see this beautiful lake. There's campers, there's counselors. But really what I surrounded myself with was my family away from my family. You grow up in camp, you're in the wilderness, you're doing activities, but eventually you're a counselor, and for me, I had the privilege of being what was called a unit head, and you're responsible for running a camp. And when you're running a camp, you're overseeing, call it 100 counselors, 200 campers, and you sort of start to develop these rules. I'll give one golden rule right now, not for me, this is an Izzy Sharp quote, but this whole golden rule, treat others as you would like to be treated, or Richard Branson says it, what you put in and how you treat others is what you can expect back from your team. I learned from an early age that caring about people, showing kindness, and surrounding yourselves with people that you trust creates an environment where not only you can thrive, but where as a compassionate leader, you can really create an environment that is magical. And so I go back all the way to the start where I grew up in this summer camp, and you fast forward all the way to starting a career. I stand today, I'm the president and CEO of a pretty large company, but it's not so much about a large or small company, it's the way that I hope that the people in this company feel that they're always going to be treated with respect, with empathy, with compassion, and most of all, with the kind of leadership that they can walk home and tell their loved ones they're proud to be a part of. So let me really define compassionate leadership for a second, because I can tell you, and for me at least, I don't have a definition. There's no dictionary that says compassionate leadership is. But here's what it's not. It is not the type of leader that makes you feel like crap. It's not the type of leader that surprises you. And at the end of the year, when you thought you were doing amazing, at the end of the year, they give you the gift of you failed. It's not the type of leader that doesn't have your back. What it is the type of leader that really cares, and it's more than caring, it's showing up consistently. It's an ability for a leader to instill trust in the people that they're surrounded by so that you're better, and by the way, so they're better for have learning or have delivering a level of consistency that you grew to admire. I'm a big acronym guy. So the funny part is I for sure maybe made up this acronym, but I'm going to call it CARE. For sure, a little cheesy, but CARE stands for, at least in my model, is communication, acknowledgement, respect, and empathy. So this whole CARE model, I want to take a step back. I've done it thousands and thousands of times. Why it resonates with me is because I sat back and said to myself, as I grow and I lead people, and I've led teams of 2,500 people and teams of 50 people, and even early in my career, teams of 2 people. What I realized as I grew was that I needed to find a way to introduce myself in a way to the team to set expectations. And I said, what are values that are important to me? Well, CARE stood for those values, and the acronym itself was a way that I showed up. So number one, communication. So you sit and introduce, hi, I'm Jeff Schwartz. I am new to this team. Let me tell you the way I like to communicate. So it opens up some dialogue, acknowledgement. How many people here are sports people? Even if you're not a sports person, how many people have been in a club? How many people have done anything where you could be given feedback? If you get no acknowledgement, good or even constructive, you have no way to improve yourself. And then what about respect? Every single person that I know not only expects respect, but they perform better when they are respected. So it doesn't mean that you can't say, you over there, go get me X. There's another way to say it is, Jeff, or I'm speaking to John. John, who's sitting here in the front. John, I would love it if you could help me do this. This is the reasons why. Often comes down to that why. And last but not least, empathy. So a lot of times you take a step back and say, wow, those folks have zero empathy. And I'm the first to say, I can tell you, being an empathetic leader isn't just about caring. It's about being human, but it's about being someone that others want to trust. So if you see me in the airport holding my computer, there's a sticker of it. If you come into my office, there's a poster of it. If you're looking on my LinkedIn profile saying, who is this guy? There's a big banner of it. My son had a bar mitzvah and he read these words out loud. And I can't make this up, but this quote is always with me. People will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. By the great Maya Angelou. For those of you that disagree, let me ask you a question. Close your eyes and ask yourself, if you go back in time and you think through your favorite teacher in school, or think through your favorite influence in your life, or if you're watching and saying, I've been in the workforce for 20 years, who's the one or two people in my career that made a difference? You don't remember the words, you remember how they made you feel. Because ultimately, when you think about growth and you think about the notion of how you grow, it's an inside feeling. It's something that fuels you. And I remember, I used to sit and read every single book, and I do read when I can now, but there's this incredible author, John C. Maxwell. And for those of you that have never picked up a book, I stress, just read one of these books. And The Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, and he was on a podcast years and years and years ago, pre-podcast mania, it could have been a radio show. And he said, if you want to focus on how you can improve, don't leave growth to chance. And I was like, well, what does that mean? And he goes on to say, and I'll use a good Costco example. Go into Costco, grocery list, and figure out what you walk away with. You walk away with the things that you thought you were going to have. Go into Costco with no grocery list, you're coming home with pool noodles, you're coming home with the biggest bags of potato chips or pretzels filled with peanut butter, everything you didn't think you needed. What's the difference? Well, simply, John Maxwell said, if you have a plan and you know where you're going and you have sort of a view of how you're going to get that growth, well, here's the great news. You're probably going to get there. And a really wise person once said to me, 99% of people have no plan. But those that do have a plan, and those that are able to connect to people on a really trusted and human level, get so much farther in life, and that sticks with me and has stuck with me for so many years. I really want to share two stories. Story number one, that whole notion of 360-degree feedback. Story number two, a personal story about my journey with ulcerative colitis. So yes, the second one a little heavier. Let's put a pin in it. Let's start first story, first journey. So I started my career in a big giant corporation, 50, 60,000 employees. And I remember you grow up, get a couple promotions, you take a step back, and one day you get the 360 feedback review. So for those of you that have done a 360 feedback review, it only comes in two flavors. It's flavor one, where everybody says everything that you never wanted to hear about yourself on a piece of paper, and you walk away and you need a drink or you need a long walk in the park. Or number two, where it's somewhat balanced and you're getting some good, some bad, some ugly, some great. Regardless of which experience you've had, it's not about the 360 feedback process. It's about a very specific piece of 360 feedback that I received. So Pete C., you never know if people want their name in full. So Pete C., retired director from the company I worked at. And Peter was his full name. Peter would say to me, you know, Jeff, you're a different kind of leader. Or Jeff, I really love the authentic approach you have. So that makes you feel really good. I remember the 360 feedback. We finish a room. This is back in the day, because I know everyone works in different ways now, but back in the day where there was no virtual, you're all sitting in a room together. And I remember doing the 360 feedback and Pete sitting across from me and he said, did you read the feedback? And I was like, well, it's anonymized, Pete. He goes, well, you want me to tell you the feedback I gave? I said, Pete, I'd love that. And he said, you're not a great listener. And I was like, well, Pete, I don't know what to say. Like, I listen sometimes. And he goes, no, let me be clear. You're not a great listener because you spend so much time talking that often you overpower the room. And I said, well, tell me more. And he was giving me an example. And he said, look at the room that we just sat in. That's why I'm giving you the feedback. And I wrote that on your 360, not because I had to, but because I wanted you to understand that when you overpower the room, you could be the happiest, you could be the most passionate, you could be the person that everyone wants to listen to, but you're never going to get the best out of the team if you're always driving the train or you're driving the bus. He said, let everybody else drive and you support them and you be there with them so that as you're going where you want to go, help them get there with your support. And I said, but Pete, I got to be a decent listener. He's like, no, you're not a good listener at all. And so you sort of take steps, or you take a moment in time and you sort of tag it and say, well, what did I learn? If Pete didn't tell me that, I could be the single worst listener, or I could have always tried to be a better listener, but I never really understood what he meant. What I know he meant was, Jeff, you talk too much. Jeff, you're so passionate and great. If you want to lead teams of 10, 20, or 2,500 people, you better be the person there supporting the team, not standing and always driving the team. And sometimes you take a step back in life and you say, what are those moments where a coach or a mentor or somebody on the team comes up to you and gives you some sage advice? For me, it's pretty simple. We all have ears and we can all listen, but are you actually taking the time to listen in a way that empowers your team to really drive where you're there to support? What if the best leaders in life aren't the ones who fill the space, but the ones that create the space for others? I reflect on that, quote and that thought, and I sort of have Pete sitting on my shoulder talking about it. You think about your career progression, and for the record, everything is so far from linear. I remember sitting in a couple training sessions and an instructor said, it's really not like monkey bars. And I was like, well, that's an interesting analogy, because in monkey bars, you're sort of climbing across in a straight line. When you start to think through leadership, and you give the example that I said that Pete shared with me earlier in my career, this notion of listening isn't like, okay, Jeff's a good listener. It's like, you start to sort of catch yourself. And so whether you're sitting in a room with a whole bunch of people or whether you're working with a team of different perspectives, I sort of will share a quick analogy of one of those things where the light bulb goes off. So when you create space for others, like just to build off of that notion, think about it this way. So there is a company, it's old now, you probably, again, I watch 60 Minutes, but if you watch 60 Minutes or you go to Google and you look 60 Minutes IDO, probably 15 years ago, there was a 60 Minutes episode which walked through this whole notion of how can you create thinking and design thinking in a room that enables and allows people to be their best self. Well, it's pretty darn simple, actually. Number one, as I mentioned before, be the facilitator. So take a step back and say, if I want to get the best out of this room, well, we need a facilitator. So let's say I'm the facilitator. You're sitting in the room. That means if Jeff has the loudest mouth and he steps out as the facilitator, he's going to have no say and he's going to pull out information. And then you look around the room. What IDEO was brilliant at was bringing around a room of people that are different. Younger Jeff would have said, great, let me get 5 Jeffs. Well, guess what? Those 5 Jeffs would come up with nothing better than Jeff would come up with by himself. But if you get a group of 5 individuals, and those 5 individuals have the freedom to speak, they have the freedom to sort of not just challenge, but get their ideas on the table in a safe environment, it's brainstorming at its best. It's ideation at its best. And guess what happens as a result? And so please watch the audio. But what you'll find is that the ideas that stick on the board, they're so much better than every other idea. Because the 5 people who are there that are completely different from one another, and they have the freedom to get those ideas up and get those ideas around, are the ones that are driving not only the biggest impact, but when you thread them all together, they have a lasting impact. So it's interesting, you sort of get that opportunity for feedback, and I want to share a little bit on this notion of philosophy. True fact, I was a philosophy major before I went to business school, and it's not because I love philosophy, but I love continuous growth and I love learning. I remember someone, and I can't even remember the person's name, said to me, Jeff, do you know the analogy on brown grass, green grass? And I was like, no, but it's pretty obvious. And they're like, okay, what's so obvious about it? I'm like, well, if you don't water your grass, it turns brown. And they're like, nope, that's not it. I said, okay, so let's talk philosophy. And they said, well, think about it this way. When you think about feedback and you think about how you learn through your career or how you learn at anything, think about the most beautiful lawn you've ever seen. You're probably watering the lawn, and for conservationists out there, I'm sorry, but you are watering the lawn probably every other day. And the reason you have to do it every other day, probably every day at the beginning, so those roots, sort of get into the ground and they really get in there, so you have strong roots or a strong foundation. And then the grass grows, you continue to give it water, you might fertilize, you cut it regularly, but you have this notion of this beautiful lush green grass only for one reason, because you took care of it. And then you have brown grass. You can see it probably everywhere you live these days because it's getting hotter out. And it's because we either don't have enough water or people don't take the time to water, so you don't have those roots. So why do I tell the story? Well, I tell the story simply. Think about the notion of feedback. I grew up in a big corporation. In that big corporation, here's where I think we got it all wrong. And I'm not saying this company, all companies. Twice a year, you do these feedback roundtables. And in those roundtables, you throw a bunch of darts up on the board and you say, these people are great, these people are less great. You leave the room, you walk, you sit, you book a one-on-one. You say, okay, I'm going to give you your review, and they hear things for the first time. That's the brown grass. The green grass, on the other hand, is this notion that there are 52 weeks in the year. So I would always say it this way. If I'm sitting with a team and you have direct reports A, B, C, D, or you have John and Jane, whoever the people are, but if you spend 52 weeks a year just giving basic feedback, having sessions where they know where they stand, you don't even need a review. Frankly, you don't even need to worry about the color of the grass because you built this strong foundation, and that foundation created strong roots, and those strong roots blossomed into something that you don't even need to worry about the feedback. The best leaders I had in my career, the single best ones, the ones where I close my eyes and I'm like, oh my God, that was John Hillis, or that was Neera Sharma, or that was David Inns, or that was this person. And those people, that was Mike McGrath. Those people, when you close your eyes, you sort of say to yourself, what made them different? They treated me differently. They treated me, and they knew that by being compassionate, being empathetic, and investing the time into my own feedback and development, that it wouldn't make them look good. It would actually make both of us better for it. And that is something I've taken along with me over and over again, and that philosophy around feedback has really stuck with me. So Michael Watkins, for those of you that have not read the book, First 90 Days, pick up the book. So the first 90 days is an exercise in only one thing. It's an exercise, as I learned with Pete, in listening, and it's an exercise in people management. And so you think through the value of this exercise of, let's call it the first 90 days. I'm going to give you a couple stories right now. I put a pin in the first one. I'm in my early 20s, diagnosed with ulcerative colitis. By the way, chronic disease, lifelong disease, and it doesn't go away. Here's the great news. When you have a plan and you have a great team and you communicate with people, you figure a way to live with the disease. And so one mention on that is I needed a 90-day plan. I needed to figure it out with a team of people that communicated with me, and I had to be open to listening to what they said. So that's in my early 20s. Fast forward again. You go into leadership roles. I've read the first 90 days probably 10 times. I had an incredible CEO sort of punctuate to me by being like, read it again. Read it again. And you'd be like, why read it over and over again? Why? Because everything is about people. And you start to think through that. I stand before you today, and am I different than I was 25 years ago from a leadership lens? Absolutely. But when you think about passion, when you think about compassion, I want to bring those themes together and just say it this way. Number one, and I said it earlier, change does not happen by chance. Number two, there's no way you can get there without a plan. And that's sort of that John C. Maxwell notion that, change and performance and growth all come hand in hand. And so when you have that plan, you can unleash the fuel. So what did I just finish in the last 90 days? It was about 180 days. But in the first 90 days, I wanted to get in shape. And so the reason I wanted to get in shape is because I wanted to be in a better performance stage for my company, for my family, but for myself. And in order to get that, guess what I needed? I needed a plan. And guess the exact same thing happens all over again. You get feedback, you have to listen to the feedback. You have to chart the growth, you know how to get there. But most importantly, you had to know where you wanted to go. And so for me, when I'm sort of taking a step back or I'm starting to think about career and how you can have passion, by the way, I want everyone to have passion. The notion of this compassionate edge, or an edge being compassionate, opens people up to actually being able to listen. It gives people a fighting chance to figure out how they can work with other people. But if I have to sort of boil it down to one single truth, it gives you the opportunity to be able to listen. And I keep going back to that, like I'll keep saying it. Pete said to me in my 360 once upon a time, I wasn't a great listener. Am I a great listener today? Probably not. There's a book called Strength Finder, and you realize that you can take some of these strengths and they can be the most magical things. Listening to me may not be my number one strength, but you can make it a competency. You can get way better at it. But by even understanding how it impacts you and how it impacts other people, you can fuel to whether it's getting better from ulcerative colitis because you have a plan, to growing your career in a corporation or in a smaller company, to getting in the best health and fitness shape of your life. You can do all those things with a simple but methodical plan, and that Michael Watkins' first 90 days, not a plug, but a real discipline in how you build that plan. Leaders become great not because of their ability to have power, but their ability to empower others. Yes, John C. Maxwell. The reason I share that quote isn't because I want to fill you with quotes, isn't because I have every quote memorized, which I probably do. It's actually back to that whole care sheet analogy. So when I grew up with this idea of how can I connect with teams and how can I be a different kind of leader, it always came back to this compassionate edge or this compassion in leadership. The care sheet that I shared earlier, and you'll see a link at some point that hopefully you can check out yourself: communication, acknowledgement, respect, and empathy. And you can fill out some questions. And when I fill out those questions or someone fills them out to me, one of the questions usually says, how do you like to be rewarded? Or how do you like to be recognized? Or even better, what's a fun fact about you? Or even better, what's your favorite quote? And so when you fill those pieces in, it really just came to my mind. So after I left a big corporation, I went to a smaller corporation, had the opportunity to join an infrastructure fund, and I got into the home comfort, home service space, and that's where I am today. And I feel blessed to have made that leap. And I remember doing the care sheet with about 250 people in our division. And I said to myself, like, there's always cool things or funny things you're going to learn. And one of the women, Sonia, ends up filling this in and leaves it on my desk, and I read it. And it said, either in fun fact or in ways I like to be recognized, it just said butter tarts. And I remember sitting in a session and thinking to myself when we were talking, nothing to do with butter tarts, by the way. I was like, wouldn't that be a good way to say thank you to someone in the future if I remember butter tarts? And so people will often see in my desk, every role I've ever had, this binder called the care package. It has all the care sheets. I have drawers at home filled with care sheets, not because I'm a hoarder, not just because I care, because I'm interested. And whether Amy texts me on her birthday and says, how did you remember? Well, it's because of the care sheets. But I was up in Muskoka visiting a friend. Muskoka is cottage country for those in the US, or a version of a beautiful cottage country here in Ontario. There's lots of them. And up there's a general store with these incredible butter tarts. So I bring the butter tarts home, I leave one on Sonia's desk. And what do you think happens? It's not magic. She doesn't run and give me a hug. It's not like that. By the way, I didn't even need a thank you. It's the recognition that I took the time to understand something that meant something to someone, and they took the time to just show me the smile or be able to react to something that made them feel special. Back to what I said earlier, I think moments in your career, moments in life are few and far between that you really remember. And so you're not remembering necessarily everything, but what you remember is how people make you feel. And it's not about how I made Sonia feel. It's about how those care sheets connect people and create a level of compassion and empathy and respect and open up lines of communication that can really create an atmosphere that unleashes creativity, trust, and a whole bunch of other things that I think are incredibly important for organizations to succeed. So I know what you're thinking. You're thinking this is a playbook, it's a system. It's neither. I think what I want to share and challenge everyone is this whole idea of personalization. Personalization in leadership creates a tremendous amount of outcomes that you never imagined was possible. Whether you use my care sheet analogy or you're sitting there saying, I don't have time to do care sheets, trust me, you have time. What it takes an hour for you to write out some things about yourself, and it takes maybe a couple hours to have the team write them and you read them. So number one, it's a personalized connection with other people that lets you foster growth at a whole new level. Number two, it's really hard. And what I mean by really hard, whether you're in a big team or a small team, it's really hard to connect. We have organizations now that are 100% remote. We have organizations that are 100% in person. We have organizations with hybrid. Without knowing things about the people on your team, you can't unleash that level of creativity or that opportunity to grow. And last but not least, I mentioned it earlier, I think the biggest failure or one of the biggest challenges in any organization is this notion of once a year performance reviews. The reason I'm saying that is I don't know what you accomplish once a year. Back to the health and wellness journey, if Coach JB, who is helping me, if he checked in with me once a year on December 31st to ask me how I did with my Good Life membership, I'm just picking on a membership, or any fitness club membership, trust me, I already failed. If he checks on me every single day, well, there's a level of accountability. I get it, it's not gonna be every day, but I think one of the main reasons why I focus this entire discussion on this notion of compassionate leadership, having a compassionate edge, is this notion that, look, if you're kind to people, how can that be a problem? If you can create trust, by the way, we make hard decisions. In this organizations, we've had to let people go. In other organizations, you have to let people go. It's not about not making the hard decision. It's not about being afraid to make a change. It's about doing something with intention or with purpose or with a little bit of empathy so that the people that are sitting there not only trust and you can look in the eye, but they're able to say, you know what? I feel like we're doing this in the best way possible for our customers, for our shareholders, for the people that work here. I can't promise that this notion of compassionate edge will change your life tomorrow, but here's what I can promise. Number one, I've used this care sheet with 10,000 people, maybe 20,000 people over 20 years, and I can tell you it's changed my life. Number two, I can guarantee you that there is an ability to outgrow your competitors by taking the time to connect with people on a different level. And number three, brown grass, green grass analogy. You build the roots, I'm telling you, the amount that comes from those strong roots always will supersede anything else, because those roots are your foundation. So I hope you enjoyed this chat today. I'm blessed to be able to spend time with you. Thank you, and I hope you find your compassionate edge.